Welcome to episode 2 of Pest Chats, a podcast series in which PCT interviews members of Syngenta's technical services teams, and they share their insights about a variety of pest control topics. I'm Brad Harbison, and my guest today is Chris Keefer, the technical services manager for Syngenta. Today's topic is fire ants, and in the following podcast, we'll get some insights from Chris on how to control these formidable pests. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Hey, Chris, for PMPs in certain parts of the country, they're really kept busy with fire ants. What are the major problems and challenges caused by fire ants in residential and commercial settings?
Well, red imported fire ants are a major pest because they are medical pests due to their stings, and they deliver a toxin that a small percentage of the population is hypersensitive to. And it's probably 1% or less of individuals that are can experience this hypersensitivity. But those people, when they experience this, they have severe reactions and can go into anaphylactic shock. So it's a real issue, and it happens probably weekly all across the United States when red imported fire ants are active. Another issue I see in residential and commercial settings is that the way that red imported fire ants swarm, they can be difficult to control due to their swarming flights, which usually occur in summer or spring after a rain event on a very humid day. The ants will just pick up and swarm by the thousands, and they can easily end up on a property that has never had red imported fire ant issues. And these swarms, during these times of year when they are super active, the swarms will just follow the direction of the prevailing winds because red imported fire ants are really weak flyers, and so they're going to end up downwind somewhere. And this can cause problems when someone has treated their yard and say their neighbor doesn't, and so the yard that you just treated ends up with red imported fire ants in a short period of time because you can't treat all the neighbors' houses as well.
That's interesting, Chris. You tend to not think of swarms as being an issue with red imported fire ants, but you did a real good job explaining why that can be an issue. Chris, as I mentioned, it's an issue for PMPs in certain parts of the country, but I want to talk a little bit about that as far as the geographical range of fire ants. How has that changed over the years? Are these pests becoming more of a problem to a number of consumers nationally?
Yeah, so since red imported fire ants, and I'm using them as the primary example here, since they arrived in Mobile, Alabama in the 1930s or 40s, that varies on what publication you're reading. They arrived from Brazil, and they've gradually moved east and west and north, expanding their range all across the southern United States. And in many states, the ants are followed by the Agricultural Extension Service, and they actually keep a dossier, if you will, of where red imported fire ants have been confirmed within their state. And so within Texas, I think there's 254 counties. If you go to Texas A&M University's website and look at the red imported fire ant section, it'll list all the counties where red imported fire ants are confirmed from. And being confirmed, that means they've been positively identified by a professional entomologist. Now, going back to are they expanding their range? Yes, absolutely. We as humans are the biggest problem, and we exacerbate the problem of these ants moving across the United States. The ants will end up in sod or plants or building materials or junk, and then we as an individual pick this sod up or these substrates up and move them across town or across county lines or different states, and we're moving the ants with us as we go about our daily lives. But with that said, many states have quarantines on red imported fire ants, so technically and legally, I guess, you cannot move infested goods from one county to another county that does not have red imported fire ants. But it's impossible for the state to even attempt to enforce this type of regulation. They primarily rely on the individuals to be responsible and to do the right things when it comes to introducing pests to different counties or states.
Yeah, it's definitely with what you had mentioned about some of these, possibility of these ants kind of expanding their range. It's definitely a pest that's on the radar for a lot of PMPs. Chris, let's talk a little bit about the biology and behavior of fire ants. What is it about their biology and behavior that makes them so challenging to control?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is lots of red imported fire ants are polygynes, meaning that they have multiple queens that support a single colony. And when you have multiple queens and their whole responsibility is to lay eggs all day, every day, you're going to get numbers built up really quick, and you're going to get high densities of ants, of red imported fire ants, if they go untreated. And when it comes to treating them, that becomes a great challenge because, if you look at a typical residential yard, it's maybe a fourth of an acre or less. And you may have several mounds in this yard, and then you may have several mounds in the adjoining yard and even in the next yard. And all those mounds could be the same colony. And so they're all supporting each other. And when you treat yard A and there's ants in yard B and C, lots of times, the ants in yards B and C, they're part of the same colony. Well, if you believe in no niche goes unoccupied, then those ants are going to move into where colony A used to be. And so, again, the yards that you just treated could become infested with fire ants much quicker than you thought it would.
Yeah, and Chris, I want to stay on this topic of treatment. What should PMPs know about properly treating fire ant nests?
Well, I would say the first thing, as always, is to make sure you properly identify the ant as red imported fire ant or a fire ant. Find suitable products that have red imported fire ants on the label. You need to follow all those label directions and the directions for use. And if you do all that, your treatment should be successful. And when you think about treating fire ants, there's a myriad of ways to go at it and lots of different ways to be successful. But primarily, you're going to be looking at baits, granules, which would leave a residual, and then liquid sprayables, or a combination of two of those or three of those different formulations. Now, the baits and granules, you can just broadcast those over the known square footage. You need to be very precise, put out the proper volume so you don't over-apply or under-apply. The liquids can be used to treat individual mounds. And if you're going to bait and spray, I would suggest that you invest in rodding tools that can be hooked up to your big rig equipment, and you can rod down into the mound and push that rod deep so that you kill the ants down in the mound and under the ground that you can't see. And then you come back with a bait and apply that over the treatment, the rest of the treatment zone. And the ants that are out of the mound at the time of application will pick up and forage and pick up that bait, and it will kill them. So you're kind of a two-pronged approach there. If you're going to apply baits, generally you want to apply baits in the late fall to reduce ants from overwintering, and that's going to decrease populations of fire ants in the spring when those ants become super active again. But if you're applying red imported fire ant baits in the summer, it's imperative that you treat in the early morning or late evening, because this is when red imported fire ant foraging is at its peak. And just like us humans, ants don't want to be out in the heat of the day. So they're up at dawn and dusk and looking for food. And baits that are applied during the heat of the day and in summer, in the southeast particularly, it's really hot. It can be 100, 105, 110 degrees in some places. And those baits lose their oil coatings, and so it makes that bait less attractive to foraging ants when they do come out and forage later in the evening or in the morning.
And Chris, let's talk a little bit about Syngenta. What is Syngenta doing to develop products for this market segment and support the industry's fire control efforts?
So, Syngenta is a global company. We have approximately 28,000 employees. We cover 90 countries, and we spend almost $1.5 billion in research and development annually. We have 5,000 dedicated staff just to research and development across the globe. And we've invested in the future of red imported fire ant or fire ant control by constantly searching for new active ingredients and compounds that show promise against red imported fire ants. So just to kind of walk you through this, so once an active ingredient is discovered and it kind of shows promise against fire ants, it is profiled, evaluated, and developed for potential as a product that we could bring to the market. Now, I'm going through this really quick, but it usually takes about 8 to 10 years to bring a product to market, and it costs about $300 million for a manufacturer to get that product to the market before we've made a penny. And so, generally speaking, through this whole process, we screen approximately 100,000 compounds a year. And if you think about it step by step, 5,000 of those compounds will make it to step 2. Maybe 30 of those compounds make it to step 3. And then we're lucky if one of those compounds gets moved along and gets put into that 8 to 10 year process.
Chris, can you tell us a little bit about Advion fire ant bait and how it works to control fire ants?
Yeah, so Advion fire ant bait is indoxacarb, and it's 0.0545% indoxacarb, and that's an oxydiazepine. It has really good activity on fire ants, and normally you go out and apply it at the volumes listed there on the label based on the square footage of the treatment zone, and you're going to get really fast control with Advion fire ant bait. You'll usually get up to 100% control within 72 hours.
And can you talk about the Secure Choice Fire Ant Assurance Program? How does this program work, and what are the benefits to PCOs?
At Syngenta, we offer our Secure Choice Assurance Program in regards to red imported fire ants. It allows PMP to apply Advion fire ant bait, which has the active ingredient indoxacarb. And those recommendations are based on expert applications that's proven by scientific research. And with the high performance of Advion fire ant bait, you can expect control in about 72 hours following the application. So with the Secure Choice Assurance, it is recommended that you make 2 applications per year, one in the spring and a second application in late summer or early fall. The application rate for the Advion fire ant bait in the assurance program is 1.5 pounds per acre. So for small applications, you can utilize a handheld spreader, or for large applications, you can use a walk-behind spreader or even an ATV-attached spreader. I would say always calibrate your equipment to ensure proper volume of bait is being applied over the treatment area. And you can find all of this information and more about the Secure Choice program in regards to red imported fire ants at syngentapmp.com.
And Chris, let's talk a little bit about marketing. In your experience, what are some of the most effective ways to market fire ant control services to your customer?
Yeah, so if you're in an area, you know if red imported fire ants are active in your part of the country or part of your state. Just offer a service to your clients and market it and promote it, whether it's annual or every 6 months, but offer a service interval that you're comfortable with for control of red imported fire ants. And if you're going to use a bait or with a bait, and be very targeted with your liquid application. So again, broadcast your bait, and if you need to, if there's high densities of mounds and you need very quick control, do that bait application and then rod those mounds to kill those mounds, and then come back at a service interval that you're comfortable with to look at to follow up and see if the ants have reinvaded or if you're still maximizing your control on that property. But really set it up as a treatment protocol based on science, and then market it to your constituents that way.
Chris, is there anything else that we haven't asked you about this topic that you'd like to add?
The only thing I can think of is, follow those label directions. If you do that, you're going to maximize your control. And those label directions, like I mentioned earlier, that label is the document that is at the end of 8 to 10 years of research and $300 million. And so we've done all the legwork, and we want you to be, the end user, PMP, to be successful. And if you follow those directions as far as volumes over square footages, and directions and follow the directions for use, then you will have lots of success treating fire ants.
Well, Chris, thanks again for joining us and sharing with our listeners some of your experiences with and some of your advice for controlling fire ants.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Have a great day.